So this is my coaching process vlog, and what you'll see here is a video that is not in any particular order and doesn't necessarily match the commentary over the top. I've merely pieced together all the negative aspects from the class, from the one session that I did, approximately an hour-long mobility class, that I didn't particularly like in terms of coaching style, behaviour or events that could have gone better. So there's approximately 10 to 12 athletes in the video, a mixture of abilities as well. So on reflection, I've noticed the biggest thing I tend to do is I struggle to coach when there's a lot going on, either with regards to background noise or excessive background movement. I tend to find it much easier to explain to my athletes when the group is close together and everyone is concentrating, rather than shouting to a very spread out class, especially as I like to make eye contact with my athletes to make sure they understand and that they're following and that there's a chance for any of them to ask questions as we go. Upon reflection, I feel this is notable because as a solo practitioner, as an osteopath, I now spend my full-time work with patients on a one-to-one basis in a fairly quiet room. The longer I've been doing this for tends to mean I find it increasingly difficult to cope with larger group settings, especially with regards to noise and concentration, and this tends to interrupt my own coaching flow and my concentration. You'll also note there's two other coaches in this video. They're not necessarily highlighted by coaches t-shirts, but I'm very lucky in this particular class. I'm supported by my colleague who's another osteopath and one of the gym's own coaches, both of whom I often use as models. The reason we tend to coach in a team rather than the solo coaches is because I wanted to ensure that athletes get enough individual time, assistance and space to ask questions and to explore any movement that we cover. In this video I can see that I often stop the class on numerous occasions in order to gather the athletes to discuss an aspect of mobility and potentially demonstrate it. This really breaks the flow of the class and I feel it makes me more of a command style practitioner. However, I feel I balance this slightly by moving around the group on a one-to-one basis where I'll ask athletes individual questions. You can't hear them because they didn't show up on the microphone, but it includes things such as, how does that feel? Do you feel it's working? Where do you feel it? Are you having any problems? Have you got any questions? I then tend to answer any questions from the individual athletes, which is more self-autonomous from an athlete's perspective. I can also see that a few of the athletes, particularly the ladies in yellow and red jumpers on the right, their body language becomes quite shut down, and in this I see a situation I could have handled better. Potentially using that space where the group was gathered in and listening, I could have asked whether they had any ideas what we could do to complete the task, i.e. how could we stretch your pectorals or maybe forearm extensors or flexors, and whether they'd like to try and figure it out before we ran through a correct or appropriate technique. This would have given more interaction between athletes and coach and athletes, and also given a space for athletes to ask any further questions. The video also highlights just how much I use visual demonstration to my athletes. Looking back, I think this is because it's my own preferred method of learning, being able to see it done before me. However, I do tend to break it down with individual athletes, and I note that some of them need much more either verbal explanation or a more kinesthetic, hands-on approach to understand the movement. I encourage athletes to copy what I'm doing if I demo something myself rather than use a model, especially if it's an area where the focus, i.e. a pec stretch, is not the same for everyone, and angles or body positions may need to be tweaked. Watching the footage back, I see that if my verbal explanation doesn't tend to work, then more often than not I end up using a hands-on approach and guide an athlete's movement. And you can see it in the end frames where particularly the small blonde female athlete is in the ring support. I'm trying to use her pelvic positioning to strengthen her position. And you'll see where I put my hands on and move her. My default explanation does tend to be quite anatomical because of my job, but this is not every athlete's strength and I recognise this, so in further practice I also